We have Elliot talking about improving IoT security and I think CoAP and some of the other standards as well. Very, very excited to hear about all that. Okay. All right. Here you go. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go off script. Karsten can speak better to CoAP than I could ever speak, and so I'm going to propose not to spend a lot of time on that. But we're here for lunch, and I'm sure, and Karsten can answer questions about that. We've spoken a lot about CoAP, and previous speakers spoke a lot about it. So I'm not going to try and dwell on that, but I have a couple of questions for people. There will now be a quiz. My first question is, how many people have own at least one thing that has a transceiver attached to it? Okay, hands up. Come on, come on. Okay, 5 things. Okay, a couple of hands. 10 things. A handful of people. Okay, all right. That's pretty interesting. So, my next question is, what's a thing? All right. So, Karsten gave, I think, one definition of an IoT device. This is something that we could spend decades arguing over, and in academic circles, I'm certain they will. But I'm going to give you my definition of a thing for the purpose of what I want to talk about. And that is, it's a device with a transceiver that, for our purposes, speaks IP of some form and has a single or small number of uses. That's my definition of a thing. So what's not a thing? Good engineering, right? Constrain your problem space. Right? If we start talking about the security of the Internet of Things, a thing can be anything from what? People have their hands up. Can somebody yell out an example of a thing they have that has an internet, that is Internet enabled? Speak up. I'm sorry? Smartphones. Okay. Karsten, what do you have? Okay, but anything that has a single or small number of uses? Say again? Okay. Okay. So I'll give you a couple of examples of things that I think are coming our way. Smart television, right? Pretty much if you buy a Samsung television these days, or an LG television these days, or any television, it's going to be IP enabled. How about, let's talk about door locks. There's not only door locks, but the doorbells in the Bay Area. There's this company called Ring. They recently got broken into. Things like that. Where they have a little camera on the front, your doorbell, you can see who's there. How about your washing machine? How many people have, if you have a washing machine, there's a good chance that next generation, the refrigerator, other elements that you might have in your home are all going to be Internet enabled. I mention all of this because I want us to have some scope of both the sort of risks that we have in front of us and the breadth of capabilities that these devices will have. Some of the devices will have 0 power attached to them. There will be energy harvesting. I'll give you a good example. There are light switches that are powered by the press of your finger. Those things have very little capability because they can only generate so much power based on that press of your finger. On the other hand, a FANUC robot has oodles of memory and oodles of power and lots of things, lots of capability. It costs a couple $1,000,000 a piece, like 10, 15. Okay, so it's maybe not something you're going to have in your home, right? But it's what's used to build cars. Okay, so before I go further, I did have a couple other questions. Who here is actually going to go to Singapore for the IETF? Okay, it's a small number. How many people are going to participate remotely in Singapore? Okay, that's good, right? So the reason that I go to the IETF at this point is because I got a problem and I want to solve it, right? And it's this problem about securing the Internet of Things. It's about how do we establish an agreement amongst different organizations, different people. The IETF consists of people, right? We don't represent really, but we try to come together as an industry nevertheless to say how will we solve a particular problem. My particular problem is the fact that no device on Earth on its own will ever be fully secure. If we talk about some of the lifetimes of these devices, that will become clear. So I got into this, actually, by looking at light bulbs. Yep, those guys. This is actually a big deal. In the United States and in Europe, and perhaps other places in the world, I can't speak to those other places, there's a huge forklift upgrade that's been going on from incandescent bulbs to LEDs because just because of the power savings. So they're very efficient devices, and as long as all these upgrades are going on, all the lighting companies have said, well, geez, okay, we're doing all this work. Why don't we just throw a transceiver on the device? Wouldn't that be cool? Well, this is what a light bulb does, right? You got your on, off, your dim, and a color. And actually, the lighting people really know how to make this work. They can actually increase sales at retailers by changing these parameters at different times of the day. They really know what they're doing. They also know that if you set colors a certain way, you can actually make people sick. It's pretty cool. I went to one of these manufacturers. They got me into a stairwell, and I got dizzy just based on the lighting. Okay. So they say, let's have a transceiver. Stick one on. I think now anybody can access the device and do whatever it is they need to do in order to control the thing, and they just don't know how right they are. So they didn't think about all this other stuff, right? They figured that little bit is all we have to worry about. And, well, why would they think that? And the answer is that they are experts in their domain. Okay, how many people in this room work at a computer company? A computing company? How many people work at at something that you would class an IoT-based company? A couple. Okay, so the IoT-based companies, it's good that they have you, right? And you're here, which is really good, okay? Because the IoT-based companies, right? They're experts in their domains, right? They look at their margins and they think, and they look at their cost of goods and services, they look at their capabilities, and they're looking at how do I improve the lighting experience for the customer? How do I help them make money? How do I help them save energy? So that's their mindset, right? And they're really good at determining what sort of effort they need to put into building something so that it lasts for a certain period of time, right? Maybe a little bit longer, right? What their warranty periods should be on that thing. How to manage color and power, how to develop the heat sinks for these things. But what they are just now learning is when they throw a transceiver on, there's all this other stuff, right? So this is the problem space that I've been working on. This, by the way, this conversation that we're going to have is only a little bit about the IETF, just so you know. Okay, it's a little bit about it's more about how do I solve a problem and why I'm using the IETF to solve it. So, here we are. That we talked about things getting attacked. Our friends to the northeast of us developed some generic DVRs that were sold under different brands, and they didn't really think about security, and so there was this massive attack, right? And it took out Twitter, right? This is the Dyn attack, otherwise known as Mirai, right? This is a clip from an article, and so up until that point, right, when we were back here, when I go and I talk to these lighting people, they say, oh, we got security, we got passwords, okay? And then we say, well, no, not okay. That's not going to be enough to get you through the day. People are, once you're on the big wild internet, people are going to attack you. And to prove the point, you could go to this website called Shodan.io. Now, Shodan is really a search engine for broken devices. What it does is it fingerprints things on the internet. It scans the IPv4 internet pretty much looking for things and has a couple of other ways of finding things. And it's trying to determine what those things are. And the way it's determining what those things are usually is because they've been left open in some way. You can find Siemens PLCs open on the internet and a programmable line controller. And the problem with that, right, is that that thing's probably controlling something important. Those devices are not cheap, right? It's probably controlling something important. Right? Traffic lights have been left on the internet. Right? And so we talk to these people, right? They say, oh, security, who cares? Right? And so the attack happens. And also, we started going to customers with them. And we say, okay, you don't care? Let's go to customers and see what they say. Within 15 minutes of opening up a conversation, the customers say, oh, wait a minute, what about security? Oh, we got passwords, right? Not all right, say the customers. And so now we have a little bit of mind share, and that helped in a bad way, right? Because all of a sudden there was all this harm that was shown. And just to add to the point, right, in the space I was looking at light bulbs, this is an actual front page headline from the New York Times. John Markoff is this guy who's been around for donkey's years. He's a technology reporter for New York Times. And so he reported on, well, what about the security of light bulbs? Well, why would he do that? How many people here know the crypto algorithms invented by RSA? Right? So this is the stuff that's basically found in most certificates, not all. Okay? Well, the S in RSA is a guy by the name of Adi Shamir. So he took a look at light bulbs. And he said, here's one light bulb. It uses Bluetooth. It's got a static key, password, right? That is configured at the manufacturer. And it's the same for every single light bulb. So what did he do? He took a drone and he flew it around a building that had all these light bulbs installed. And he took over the building. Right? That's cool, yeah. It's nice that he did it in a nice, safe environment, which I think was picked a building that, he told people he was going to do this. And so I thought it would just be cooler if he took over the drone. If he actually hacked the drone, that would be like another level of indirection, which we computer science people love. So, okay, we know we have ourselves a problem. We have two types of attacks then that I want to mention here. Right? The first is what I call a direct attack. That guy on the left, on the right there is a smelting plant, right? It's a furnace. And this actually happened in Carson's home country, right? A plant was attacked. The furnace was taken over by a hacker, right? The operator could have been seriously injured if he was unable to turn off the furnace, which in fact the hacker prevented him from doing. But fortunately, they were able to regain control before somebody got injured. That's a direct attack. Somebody attacks your automobile, your internet-enabled automobile, and causes you to have a crash. That's a direct attack. All right, bad news about direct attacks is that they harm you. Okay, good news about direct attacks is that you now have an incentive to get them fixed. That was not the case with the Mirai attack, which is the device at the bottom, right? Which was an indirect attack. Somebody hacks into your DVR. Do you care? Well, what are they going to do? Erase my program? Right? But they used it to attack Twitter. Right? Donald Trump might care about that. I don't know. But a lot of us do, right? Because other things were attacked too. That direct attack is what we call an externality. So I'm looking at addressing both of those. All right, your customary eyeball shot here. These are numbers of things, right? This is one dimension. This is another dimension of our problem, right? We have all these things that are coming online, right? It's not actually the dimension of the problem I care about exclusively, right? Because we're actually really good at handling scale at that level. And Carson said, don't worry about going up, worry about going down, right? Well, I mean, you think about it, right? Those iPhones and Android devices that you have, right? Apple manages over 1 billion of those, and they manage them well. Google manages even more. I actually think they don't do quite as good a job as Apple, which is actually one of the reasons I got into this. But they do a pretty good job. That's 2 billion devices right there. Okay? And we're really good at 0-1 many when they're all the same. So here's my problem. I think we're entering a world in which they won't all be the same. And because of that, if you go to Shodan, right, you can't even count the number of sites, the number of types of devices. We don't even know what a type of device is. We could spend decades arguing over what a thing is. We could spend decades arguing over how many types of things there are. So we don't know that number. So we have to assume, in computer science terms, big num. Right? That is to say, they're going to just be vast numbers of them. And we have every reason to believe that this is true. Right? And to prove the point, we go into, when I talk to customers in the medical field, right, they say, we initiated a 4-year survey 4 years ago, and we're terminating it now and giving up. We just don't know what's on our network because we can't profile it. Talk to another customer and say, we actually finished that profile. Right? And then the day after we finished it, like we did this this was a tier 1 system integrator did this for a medical customer. The day when the integrator left the building, right, another device was added. The customer said, what do I do now? So this is a problem. Okay. Now, another thing about these networks and devices, right, is we have another axis, which is if you have a very static environment, like the one on your left, an oil field, you're going to drop equipment in. It's going to be internet enabled, and it's going to be there for a very long time. You know, oil wells, 20 to 40 years, the average. Right? Fred actually has experience in the energy industry. He started out there, and you know, things go into mines. They go there and they stay there. Right? So for us people who've grown up on the internet, we think, oh, you're going to replace your device every 3 years, you know, it's a phone, whatever. Not so much. On the other hand, and so the nice thing about these guys, right, though, is that if you get the hardware right, you get the software right, you drop it down there, you get the configuration right, you amortize the cost of all that over 40 years. Okay, let's look at the picture on the right. So here we have an infusion pump, right? It's just one of a plethora of devices that can be in a hospital. And the patient needs what the patient needs, when the patient needs it. None of this amortization crap. Right? They need it, and it has to work, or somebody can be hurt. So we need systems that can auto-configure. So what does this all add up to? What it all adds up to is this. If you want your children to do well in this world, you might tell them, oh, study and be a doctor. Okay, but if you want them to really make money, tell them, no, grow up and be a network administrator, because we're not going to have enough network administrators on this planet to be able to deal with this. Okay? So, what do I propose that should be done about this? Okay. The first thing I propose is actually we continue on the trajectory that we're attempting to put manufacturers, which is build secure devices. And we have to tell manufacturers what that means, give them our best advice, but do so with great humility. Because there's not a single manufacturer, my own included, Cisco, that hasn't gotten it wrong, and recently. Right? Cisco has an entire page that is devoted to vulnerabilities called the TCERT page. Every major manufacturer in computing has this, right? We've all worked with certs, okay? So we have to do so with humility. We don't really know all the right answers here. Let me give you a perfect example. How can a car be secure over a long period of time if it's going to be internet enabled, right? What happens when this key strength is proven weak and somebody can break into it? How long does the manufacturer have to support that vehicle? What about secondary markets? Does anybody in this room have a car that was manufactured more than 20 years ago? Okay, good. All right. There's a lot of people who have cars that are manufactured more than 10 years ago. I do. Okay. Well, somewhere between now and then, right? The manufacturer is going to say, I don't want to support that. Okay. Well, what advice do we give them? It's a hard problem. Talk about hard problems. Go back to the picture of the device with the oil well. That thing's dropped into the ground. What advice do we give them? So there actually is a standard that helps in these contexts. And it was mentioned earlier, at least obliquely. The IEC has this standard called 62443, which is it's all about securing processes that are intended to be production processes. And it comes in like 4 parts. So they do some work on that. So the first thing we want to do is have the device defend against attacks itself. But then, because we know they're going to get it wrong eventually, because we do, the network needs to step in and also provide a layer of protection. And this is the whole basis of cybersecurity, which is that you provide layers of protection. So I'm going to skip a little bit here. But the basic concept that I'm going to introduce is something called manufacturer usage descriptions, which Karsten mentioned. The basic idea here is you have these devices. They have a certain use, or a single or small number of uses, right? And you want to protect them. And so you have to figure out how to protect them. And so what we proposed is a means to describe how to protect them, and a means to convey that information to the router that already is there. So, assumptions. I don't know, there's a little glare in here. I'm not sure you guys can read this, but I'll read them off. We'll start with the fact that a thing has a single or small number of uses. We can relax that later, right? But as an engineering constraint, this is where we start. That things are tightly constrained. That's not always true, but let's hold to that point because it means that we'll have some broad applicability. We know that, as a matter of course, things that are secure today won't be secure tomorrow, and we don't have any proof that, in fact, they're secure today. Okay, and that's also added as an assumption that network administrators are the kings and queens of their own castles. Okay, so it's your network, your devices, you get to decide access policy at the end. So our assertions, therefore, are that because a thing has a single or small number of intended uses, all other uses are unintended, right? And any intended use, therefore, can be clearly identified in a formal way. We can warn off all other uses. In fact, we can implicitly warn off all other uses by simply saying, here are the uses that are intended, right? We don't have to enumerate all the ones that aren't. Right? And further, that the manufacturers are in a good position to describe what these uses are because they design these devices for a single or small number of uses. That's why general purpose computing, right, this doesn't really apply to as much because the manufacturer can't describe what the use is going to be. So this is very much akin to an aspirin bottle. This is an analogy that you'll see in the industry from time to time. Where they'll say, you get the little instruction that says, here's what you use the drug for. You want to use it for another purpose? It's your mouth, it's your body. Pop it in, right? But on your own head be it. Right? So what does it mean, if we have this formal description of intended use and unintended use? I mean, do we have structures for that? Well, of course we do, right? They're called access lists. They were designed into IP networking back when I was a student, and the dinosaurs were still around. I look a lot younger than I am. So we have this today, right? And so now all we need is a means to describe it. Well, let's take some 1980s technology and mix it with today's technology, which is JSON and Yang, and we're going to come up with a way to describe what amounts to access lists. Now, there are a couple of catches. as a scale point, right? Can a manufacturer know what access list to put in my home directly or into an enterprise? The answer is no, because they don't know my topology. So I have to abstract out the IP addresses, which is the only thing I've done in the context of MUD, right, from an access list. We abstract out the IP addresses. We introduce a couple of different classes. We say, here, manufacturer, provide these classes, and my local environment will fill those in. That's the basis of MUD. Here's a basic way that we might do that, right? Something like you can describe these classes. You can fill them out in any particular way that you want to fill them out. So what I'm going to show you is basically a lab setup that we actually did, right? And the idea is that we actually took Anima, which is the bootstrapping key infrastructure, right? And so let's look at this light bulb here all the way on the left. And we're going to assume that the bad guy up there in the black hat is an authorized device that has general access to the enterprise network, okay? And we don't know it. Because if we knew it, we'd just unplug it. Demo over, right? But the light bulb starts with the following bits of information. It starts with a device certificate and that the manufacturer has provided, and a manufacturer trust anchor, meaning it's going to trust its manufacturer. Why? The manufacturer built it. Okay? So now what we want to do is a trusted introduction into an enterprise network. So that starts with a query. Let's just put out a query saying, where's the registrar? And when you think registrar, think AAA server, okay? Excuse me, Mr. Router, where's the registrar? Or excuse me, Mr. Switch, where's the registrar? Okay, so the switch says, here it is, here's an IP address, go talk. And the registrar says, okay, so now the device says, hey, Mr. Registrar, I want to register on your network, but I don't trust you yet. So I'm not sure, but maybe you're the right people. So go see if you can register me. The registrar basically looks at the certificate, pulls some information out of the certificate that includes a URL or URI for a RESTful attach point. Okay, and you send a couple of RESTful queries which essentially says to the manufacturer server, does this device belong on this network? If it does, the manufacturer server could log it, even in a public log. Somebody said something about blockchaining earlier? Ding, ding. Okay, so the manufacturer server then sends back a voucher. The voucher has signed a local deployment certificate, right, which goes back to the registrar. Okay, and then at some point, the registrar might say, hey, Mr. Network Administrator or Madam Network Administrator, should this thing be on my network? Now, when we did the demo, this was the fun part, because we said, if she says no, demo over. But let's assume she says yes. Okay, so at that point, a trust anchor is installed on this light bulb. So now we have a device that has a local deployment trust anchor. It's installed it because it trusts its manufacturer who has signed the request from the local deployment registrar. Okay, and now what we need is a local certificate in that device. Since the device is just communicated to the registrar knows it, so it can now do a normal enrollment protocol, an EST communication, and then it can do a normal 802.1x transaction. And now what it does is okay, I want to connect to the network. Okay, and so it's going to get in that certificate, the manufacturer certificate, there was another parameter which says go get the policies. Right, it's another URL. That points to that file I showed you earlier. And the MUD controller says, yep, okay, here are the policies that have been instantiated into normal access lists, good old-fashioned access lists. We'll communicate that back through Radius. That's the implementation we did. It doesn't have to be. Okay. And so we set that thing up with some rules. maybe some rules for each of these other devices as to who they can talk to. And by the way, the guy with the black hat is left out cold. And what we've done is reduce the threat surface of the device to just that which it's intended to talk to. Because it has a single or small number of uses, we can do that. That's what the MUD URL looks like. This is either in a certificate or it can be communicated via LLDP. If a device can't handle a certificate, there are different security properties if you do that. It could be done the same in DHCP as well. It could be done the same in other ways. One of the things about the IETF is that we like to build building blocks. And you can mix and match the building blocks as you like. MUD contains a handful of building blocks. So we're reducing the threat surface. We're trying to do that using very incremental methods so you don't increase overall capital expenditures. We want to make it easy for the manufacturer, right? Because if it's hard for the manufacturer, they're not going to do this. They're learning, right? They have COGS to worry about. You say, if you can do the certificate, great, do the certificate. The nice thing about a certificate is that it's you asserting what the device's capabilities are and what that device is, not the device itself, right? That's a very nice property, right? Because it means the device, if it's hacked, cannot then say, I'm on this thing now. Right? It's standards-based. Why would I bring any of this to the IETF in the first place? The answer is because Cisco can't do this all on our own. Right? We don't build all those things. Right? It's everybody else building them. Right? That's why we standardize. We're not doing this just because we like the IETF. We're doing it because we need industry agreement on this. And the manufacturers themselves are saying to us, is this a standard? If it's just Cisco's thing, we're not going to play. So that's why we come. It's not just because we like the IETF, which we do. Okay, and the other thing the manufacturers get out of this is that they avoid the front page, and more importantly, they avoid getting phone calls when things break. That can really cost them. So we have a little challenge, right? In the IETF, we're very, we like to believe in the end-to-end model. We like to believe in permissionless innovation. And we need a way yet for a device to be protected and for the network of other devices to be protected from it. So we don't want to have some overlord that requires, where we require that overlord's permission to allow for innovation. The point of MUD is to strike a balance in that, to say, here I am as a manufacturer saying, this is what I need. Unless you have good reason to not give it to me so that I can operate appropriately. Right? At the same time, we reduce that threat surface. Right? We deny permission. The network denies permission to other devices that have no business talking to it. Why? Because the manufacturer said, I don't need to talk to them. Right? So we're trying to run that fine balance between open and limited access. Okay. So, summary. What do you get from manufacturer usage descriptions? You get a URI, right? That MUD URL I showed you. You get it via DHCP or via an EAP method or LLDP. And you get a file that is based on it's a Yang model, right? That's been instantiated in JSON. And I'll just point out, right? Have we configured the device at all? With a certificate, yes. But other than that, we're configuring the network, right? We're just configuring the network in terms of what access is needed. We're trying to leave the device alone. Why? Because it's already got a job. Okay. And then the network will then instantiate that class information into things that we know all about, like access lists. Okay. So what do manufacturers need to do? First of all, they need to recognize they have a problem, right? And they have to do some stuff. Right? They absolutely have to observe best coding practices, right? And we have to help them with that. And by the way, we ourselves have to be able to get them to follow those practices. We're asking them to do other things like, establish an incident response capability, right? many manufacturers never had a transceiver attached to any of their devices. All of a sudden, they're getting attacked. Well, who do you call? How do you pick up the phone? This is the learning curve that we're dealing with, right? And we're saying, tell us what this thing is and how to protect you. You tell us what this thing is, how to protect you, and that's what we'll do. So I'm going to say a few words also, right? I've been talking a little bit about, what we're doing. A lot of that stuff was all about the IETF. I'm going to say that the home needs a little bit of work, right? I think personally, we need to take another crack at WPA Personal. Anybody who's been following the press lately knows that WPA2 Enterprise, actually WPA2 Personal already needs work, right? There are some problems with the crypto that are being addressed. But we need a way to better onboard wireless devices. How does device get a SID? Right? The Wi-Fi Alliance is looking at something called DPP for this, which is Device Provisioning Protocol. That's something we're looking at as well. We're not sure we're going there, but it's something we're looking at as an example. We're going to look at IEEE methods. We're going to look at IETF, new IETF EAT methods, possibly. But one of the big challenges is onboarding 802.11 devices is a little bumpy, to say the least, right? Because you don't have a user interface on the device that you want that you can enter, like the SID, for instance, or credentials. In many cases, some of these devices are like light switches. What do you do? Morse code for that? So you can't do that. So we need a way to get that information in the device. What a lot of devices are doing is they establish an 802.11 network where they are the station, and you join their network, and then you go to a web server, which means the device needs to run a web server, which means it's something that can break. We don't really want that either. So we need a better approach. Okay, so more information. Here's where I am. I will be at the IETF next week. If you have questions about the IETF and its working processes, I've been involved since 1989 myself. Please come find me or drop me an email, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about the processes of the organization. How many people will be going for the first time? Anybody? One person, two people? How many people are going there for the second time? Anybody? Okay. For the two people that are new, do people who've been there, do they have one sentence of advice in terms of how to interact with IETF attendees? Anybody want to speak up on that one? I'll give you mine. Be assertive if you want to get things done. Ask questions and challenge. If people are challenging your ideas, that's what they're there for. They're there. The vast benefit of the IETF is that they can make things better by testing your ideas and maybe providing some guidance on how to make it better. Fred?
I add one point to that.
Mm-hmm.
Bring your thickest skin. IETF people are assertive.
We're a pretty rude bunch. We are. So be prepared for that, And we're particularly rude to remote attendees. So be as assertive as you possibly can in that context. I hope to see you at Singapore if you're coming, and I hope to see you online if you're not, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.